this can't be episode 23. If someone wants to catch up on all our episodes and they listen to one a day, it would take them over 3 weeks.
Yeah.
That's a respectable output, isn't it?
Well, I think our email address has been a source of entertainment for us.
Well, yeah.
So,
but it's not fulfilling any of its traditional roles.
Well, I'm not too upset about that, to be honest.
I did fix it, by the way. You can now email Ian and Ash at whatalotofthings.com. I assume you got my test message.
I did.
So it does work.
And I see that Neil Studd commented on the... He already deconstructed the new email address.
Yes, he did.
Into, what did he say? An Iowan grandmother's name. Let's have a quick look.
This is the kind of silence, by the way, that benefits from editing.
Yeah. So, love the new IA Nandash email address. Those Iowan grandmothers need all the support they can get for their running efforts. There you go. So I replied personally to Neil and said, I knew I could rely on him to be on the team Technolog, ye yours.
I failed to see the connection between his Iowan grandmother racing and Technolog,
ye yours.
I did my best to write it in the show notes for the last episode. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, the last but one episode. Because we're in our sort of time machine
in the
mode
time machine
at the moment.
again. Yeah.
So I'm going to just ask you what your thing is.
So my thing, Ian.
No. I have to ask you in such a way that when you answer, it sounds like you're answering me, asking you, rather than answering me, telling you I'm going to ask you, which doesn't work at all.
Okay, right, go.
So, Ash.
What?
Yeah, exactly. I'm caught up in the Monty Python
that is
Bridge Guardian.
So that is creeping in. Yeah, it really is.
Yes.
It's like appearing over the last few episodes. It's just gradually started to increase in appearances.
What is your name? What is your thing? Damn you, Monty Python.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of a worm, isn't it? It gets into the episodes and then it's very hard to remove.
Yes.
Not that it has to be removed, I guess.
A Monty Pythonectomy.
Yeah.
No, we will not remove it. Not the Messiah. It's a very naughty boy.
Well, yeah.
And then we can finish with a rousing rendition of Always Look on the Bright Side of Life.
So I'm going to launch into my thing.
So Ash, tell us, what is your thing?
So my thing is entitled Figma is an antibody for collaboration between designers and development teams.
Rather than just a figment of my imagination.
Yeah. So I suppose we should do a bit of what is Figma, shouldn't we, first?
Yeah, because we totally didn't do any What is Ilkley Live.
No, I did note that.
2 episodes ago.
So everybody do your own research on what Ilkley Live is.
Or was at that time.
So what is Figma? So I'm quoting here from the official Figma site. Figma is a web-based design tool that allows users to create, share and test designs for websites, mobile apps and other digital products. It is a popular tool for designers, product managers, writers and developers.
You see, I read that and I thought that was what you were saying about it.
No, I decided to just go with the site.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So here are some things you can do with Figma. Design websites, app interfaces. You can prototype. You can collaborate. Share templates, designs, widgets. And you can gather feedback. So explore ideas and get feedback from others. That sounds great, doesn't it?
Why would you want to share templates, designs and widgets with millions of users? It just seems a bit impractical.
Well,
what if they all said thank you?
I mean,
can you imagine?
I don't think you want to, but basically Figma are going to collect that and then share it with millions of users around the globe, especially if you're on the free version.
It's not me that's sharing it, it's them.
Yeah. So with their new AI, of course, offering...
No. Surely no AI offering has it's everywhere, isn't it? Surely no AI offering just scrapes an incredible amount of data that people are putting into this tool and then uses it as a product to sell to other people. That would never happen.
That would never happen.
Especially not under the branded umbrella of AI.
Yeah. So that's what Figma is, or at least what the Figma marketing site says.
Yeah, and I've used it a little bit and really liked it.
Okay.
Not for massive stuff, really, but just for small things.
The massiveness is one of the things that I will come on to. So why is this interesting to me? I hear you ask, Ian.
I didn't ask, but by all means, let's pretend I did.
So I'm not anti-Figma. I actually quite like it as a tool itself.
Sorry, but anti-Figma sounds like a person.
This is my anti-Figma.
Yeah.
My Uncle Adobe Illustrator is somewhere else.
Yeah, you've just said you're not anti-Figma.
I personally am not anti-Figma.
Someone else might be. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'll get my coat. Actually, no, I won't. I'm just going to stay here and listen to what else
I've got
you
my
have to
coat
say.
on. I'll just leave.
Yeah.
I think it's actually an extremely rich platform for designing applications. But I think the problem is that the richer it becomes, the worse the collaboration gets. And the further you get from the right thing to actually build. Because you just end up with more and more designs and more ideas with less idea about what the right thing is to build.
So hang on a second. So how does that happen? So I'm imagining that when a company comes along and says, let's do a design using Figma, they do a design and then they show it to people. So what happens that causes what you're describing after that? What happens after that causes it?
So you choose Figma as the thing you want to use, and then you go from having this really nice, well-featured tool that you want to use to help your designers and developers collaborate, but then suddenly you've reached critical mass in terms of designs and ideas, and then no one knows where to start or what to build. So how do we get there? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what it sounds like is there are lots of design options for a thing, but if someone decides on one, doesn't that finish the problem?
Yeah.
But people don't.
So this is based on experience at the last place that I worked in.
That used Figma.
Yeah. So we ended up with masses of designs, but never like a discernible starting point for those designs. So we would get introduced to a feature. There would be a massive Figma workspace of designs, flows, because they're really easy to put together in Figma. And you can copy and paste, and you can do all these terrible things that mean you just end up with masses and masses of designs. And then what happens is you put them in front of a development team, and the development team looks at it and goes, well, there's like years worth of work here. How on earth are we going to do this?
Is that because they're looking at end state designs for something where what they really need to be building is a smaller start at it?
Yeah. So basically what used to happen was we would get introduced to these masses and masses of high fidelity designs that look like mobile apps. I'll come on to a little bit about why that's a bit of a bad thing as well. And then we would then have to reverse engineer them as the technology team to find somewhere to start that fit in with like how we were going to build it.
So that feels a bit like there's a way that it could be used that actually would work well.
Yeah.
But there's no friction to people just going nuts and...
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you can look incredibly productive as a designer and come up with loads and loads of ideas and loads of flows based on those ideas, because you're just copying and pasting them around and then using the AI features to generate more and more.
The AI features.
Yeah. And then when you bring in the development team to have a look at them, they're already very, very highly featured with no discernible starting point. So I think what happens is that Figma gives you the temptation to run off and do loads of designs and try and think of loads and loads of things, rather than just looking at one journey, building it out, introducing it to the development team, and then working on it from there. So I think it stops you from thinking what is the simple starting point and leads you down the more complex path, because it's such a rich and featured tool to do that.
So what's needed then is some good level of discipline in using it.
Yeah.
So I suppose what I'm imagining, it's like a lean problem. So the bottleneck is the development team. And so a big pile of work piles up in front of that bottleneck.
Yeah.
Generated by designers who are not bottlenecks.
Yeah. Yeah, because they could just generate new journeys and new ideas sort of ad infinitum.
So is this where we come up with the what a lot of things way? How to use Figma without demoralizing, destroying, and otherwise depressing your development team? And the answer is, of course, the designer has to be in the team. That's the first answer.
Yeah, I think so. I think Figma designs have always been a bit dangerous to me because they look done.
Yes.
Which is a dangerous state to be in, because if you put a product person in front of a page full of Figma designs which cover all the flows that they've thought of, then it looks like it's done. It's like, well, we just need to turn that, and I have heard that. We just need to get it into the exactly. We just need to get that into the app because it looks like the application itself. And I think that's quite an intoxicating power to have.
I really like. So I went through a long period of doing PowerPoint slides that had a lot of hand drawn stuff in them, because PowerPoint slides, when they're well done like that, appear to be these are the tablets of PowerPointness that I have come down the mountain with. This is the answer. It's obviously complete. There's obviously no further room for debate about whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I found that by doing scrawly pictures and putting them in there with bad handwriting, which my iPad and Apple Pencil was very helpful in making it quite easy and frictionless for me to do that. But that did convey a much greater sense of, I need your help with this, rather than this is it.
Yeah, this is and these are the 10 Commandments.
I also like Excalibur.
Right.
For that same. Have you used Excalibur at all?
No, it's the name is. Does it come out of a lake?
There's no watery individual distributing.
That's a shame. I don't want it then.
I don't want it then. I don't know why it's called that, and I do agree it's a kind of funny name.
Yeah.
But one of the things it does is it's like a quite simple web-based diagram tool, and it's open source as well. So you can do things like, if you're using Obsidian, which is a note-taking thing, that you can just get a plug-in and embed Excalibur drawings easily in your document, that kind of stuff. But one of the things is that it has different modes, and the mode that's the default mode makes everything look like a sketch.
Right.
So you draw a rectangle, and it's definitely a rectangle, but it's not coloured in. It's got like a hatched line pattern to make it look coloured in, but it isn't really. And it looks wobbly, and you can actually make it look. There's settings of wobbliness, so you can make it look really wobbly or a bit less wobbly. Yeah. But that again lets you do quite nice diagrams, but with that feeling of informality about them.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think because of Figma's like fidelity of what it produces, over time, so in the example that I'm talking about, they started to replace low fidelity prototypes, ideas.
Yeah.
If the ideas weren't part of the designs, then they weren't ideas. Examples, you didn't do that anymore. Didn't do, say, user stories or link them to personas or anything like that. You know, like kind of the good stuff of
where you actually think about, is this solving a real problem that somebody has?
Yeah, absolutely. So all that got replaced by this gigantic Figma file, which then became the place where you go to look at what needs to be built. And there was no other avenue. And you know who else thinks that they're complete and done as well? Developers. Because there's so many journeys in there that they're like, there can be no other journeys. And as a tester, you go, well, what happens if the user bails out midway through the process? What do we do? And they're like, well, that's not in the Figma file, is it?
Yeah, the
I'm
Figma
like, oh
design
my
is
God.
quite clear that the user never bails out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the user always completes their journeys, don't they? But then you've got this barrier, yet another barrier put up, because as a tester, you know that there's lots of, within the requirements and around the requirements, there's lots of hidden requirements, because what happens if, you have a slow internet connection, or what happens if the user bails halfway through the journey. But that wasn't in the Figma file. Therefore, it needed to be then put into the Figma file before we could begin to handle it. And then that became another ticket in Jira, and then it never got done.
So this seems like there's a lot of feedback loops that are missing in this way of working.
Yeah. It just became a bit of a gravitational anomaly. Everything got sucked down towards Figma rather than thinking about other ways of expressing what the user needs are.
But Figma lets you do low fidelity prototypes, doesn't it?
Yeah. But once you've got high fidelity screens already in there, designs, you're not going to use them. Or you're going to use them less. Or might not even think to use them, because it's like, well, I can just copy the existing designs and then make them, tinker with them as I need to.
So what would this look like if it was working as it should?
So you would start with a lower fidelity prototype, maybe go with a couple of the key journeys, talk to your development team about it, and then start to build out from there. But you would put thought into like what the starting point is, but not just from a design point of view, but from like the whole system, because there's technical constraints and where you can start from as well, isn't there?
So is that like another dimension? So effectively, you've got in your Figma file, you've got, here are all these user journeys, and here are the designs that participate in them. Are we also saying, actually, we need a temporal axis there? So here is version 1 of the user journeys, and then version 2 of them.
Yeah. So that's essentially what I'm going to say because that's basically what I had to do. I had to wade through them all.
Oh, no.
And tear them apart and pick out the bits where we could actually start and get some feedback, which seemed a bit weird to me, because obviously as part of the development team, I'm interested in getting the feedback, but the way that the work was introduced using Figma as its container did not lend itself to that. And that meant that we spent like maybe a couple of months from being introduced to the designs to actually starting, because they need to go through this whole process of reverse engineering the designs rather than working together to come up with those simple starting points.
But it's about team dynamics, isn't it? It's having, so presumably the product person is coming up with, here's a feature that I want in it. The designer's going off and doing that, but the feedback loop is only back to the product person, not forward to the development, the rest of the team. And actually, if you include the designer in your multidisciplinary team, and then the whole team is basically saying only design things that we're going to build immediately.
Yeah.
Don't design 28 versions ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
That seems like the way to go.
Yeah. So ironically, in our Jira backlog, we tried to keep it as lean as possible and just not have like tons of stories littered around that we would never work on.
Yeah.
But then that like waste, if you like, just went somewhere else. It went into Figma and in the form of designs. And then that's where everything that would never get built went to live. It was a very strange process. So we had a nice clean Jira backlog, but we had this other store of where all the things that would never get built went to live.
But the only problem with that is that as developers, you could see it.
Yeah.
As the team, what you actually want is an ideas file somewhere with the designer has on their own or with the product person. But there is a separate file that is the delivery designs.
Yeah.
Because actually, as developers, you don't care if people are going off and having ideas necessarily. But you need something that you can build.
Yeah, yeah. And that has the way to get started in it, rather than it just being a mass of designs.
So that way to get started, what do you think that looks like?
So I think what I arrived at in the end, was like a stripped down version. I went and took out everything that was, let's say where you could vary the journey. So if there was an edit capability for something, I was like, not yet. If there was two choices you could make at this point, one choice.
Right.
You just go through the journey and that's it. So basically I stripped out lots of the extraneous branches and then said, right, this is what we're going to build first. So, which didn't seem all that hard to me, although I got lots of pushback while I was doing it, saying, well, we need that. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm not saying...
We're never doing it.
I'm saying, let's not do it now.
Yeah.
Because, well, quite frankly, it's not that important. But...
It also goes against the idea of an MVP, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So, including things which you may learn you don't need to build.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, it's not an anti-Figma, acknowledging my anti-Figma. It's how we use these
anti-Figma.
It's how we use these tools and what they give us as a team and how they warp how teams collaborate together, which is why I was really interested in what this was doing, and especially like trying to keep a nice lean Jira backlog and then watching all the waste squirt out somewhere else. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening here?
Yeah. And I guess there's a lesson there about keeping that, I'm going to say, sort of more blue sky future vision. I mean, product people have to have a vision for where they want to end up, because otherwise you can't start without that. But you have to, first of all, have a light touch on that. It needs to be, it's the strong opinions, loosely held thing.
Yeah.
But also, if you expose all that to everybody all the time, it's kind of distracting.
Yeah.
There's a right amount of information, isn't there? Because what you don't want to find out that, oh, well, we were planning for this feature to turn into this other thing. And oh, well, if I'd known that, I would have built it completely differently.
Yeah.
You can't, you're not trying to completely conceal this direction, but it's recognizing the need that people will have to actually do something concrete to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, because I think the net result of the journey that we went on was, when we actually got to the point where we could build it, we did it fairly fast.
Yeah.
But it just took so long to get there because there was a deluge of designs because of the way we were using the tool.
And then spending the time that you had to spend deconstructing them to an extent and making them into, okay, version 0.1, off you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's a few other things at play as well where I think in my experience of tech, people struggle to break things down in general into something that's simple, but not so simple that it's rubbish.
Yes.
I think that's something that people have struggled with a lot. And I actually think that I can do that kind of work. I can take a problem and break it down into simpler iterations, which is a skill that served me well, but I find that I have to use it a lot because many of the ideas and solutions that are presented to me, I'm like, well, okay, but that's going to take a long, long time and we're going to get no feedback. So, well, how about we do this? But then I have to go on the journey of changing everyone's minds, which is a long journey, which is that's what takes the time. Because if we would have just said, how long will it take to implement all the designs for this, that was in Figma for a given feature, and we said 2 years, then that would have not been acceptable. It would have been like, we need to do it faster than that.
Yeah.
But, well, I know we do, but you need to know this information, and we're going to have to go through the process of deconstructing and reverse engineering these designs to build something that we can actually deliver.
Yeah, and it's kind of that's it, isn't it? It's limiting the designs to what's going to be delivered in a piece of, in a sprint or whatever.
Yeah. Which I think the world is bad at, and tools like Figma, it's not Figma's fault, obviously, but they can encourage and become containers for some pretty ropey behavior when it comes to delivery of designs and collaboration between designers and development teams.
Yeah, but, I suppose it's like a lot. I mean, people can do things with Git that make you weep. I think it's a feature of many of the more powerful tools that we have, that they give you much more than the required quantity of rope to hang yourself. They give you the rope to hang everybody, and you have to be disciplined about, how you use that.
Yeah, because I think that one of the challenges with tools of like the class of Figma is coming up with ways of working around them. Because you just figure it's going to handle it for you, but it doesn't, does it? Like
No.
with Git, you need ways of working.
Yes.
That's why you have different strategies for using it.
Yes.
So if you just let the use of it just happen organically, all kinds of crazy stuff would happen, right?
And does.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the same.
Yeah.
So it needs to be part of the word pipeline is probably a bit overused and has some specific meanings in terms of Git and stuff. But if you had a quite clear, it needs to be very clear what the journey of work is through the team.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is where you need that stuff. It needs to be clear that what is the designer doing in their role in the team. I mean, they may be doing things like helping the product owner visualize the future.
Yeah.
But that's not the same thing as their role in the team delivering.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I put down a couple of things that I would do with Figma. So
what a lot of things weigh.
Well, so
the way of things.
The general sort of principle is design as a team, but just in time. So, like you said about fitting it into a sprint or having that, that simple starting point that everyone can get on board with without feeling overwhelmed.
Yes.
So create the key journey in Figma and let the whole team work out the rest. So all the strange hidden requirements, all the error handling states for that particular journey, and try and build that and find that meaningful thing to build. And then I think you make a good point about having because you can have different workspaces in there, so you can put your more fanciful ideas.
Fanciful. The plans for the future vision.
Yeah, exactly. You can put them in one place, and then you can put, you might have come up with a more detailed set of designs for a given feature, but you don't have to show them all straight away and ask how long it's going to take. So try and allow that sort of natural collaboration and feedback to let the designs emerge a bit more.
Yeah.
Which still allows you to use the power of Figma, I think, as a tool.
Yeah. And I think I also sort of would add to that something about insisting on the use of low fidelity designs.
Yeah.
Especially for that vision stuff. You know, I mean, the thing is that sometimes you might have to sell things to investors, or you might have to do a very high fidelity version of something that is a long way off. But in general, we should use the fidelity should only go to full fidelity at that point of we're about to build it.
Yeah.
And keeping things low fidelity earlier in that process, I think, is probably a good discipline.
Yeah.
Because it focuses on what it's doing and how it works, not what does it look like.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then I think you've got less chance of freezing your development team in place while they desperately try and figure out how they're going to build the things that you want from the designs.
Yeah.
And then I would also say, don't discount other forms of specification, if you like. User stories, personas, whatever it is, and stick with the designs because you know that you can build them quickly, as in the designs themselves you can copy and paste within the design tool, Figma in this case, in order to have lots of designs very early. There's other ways to express like what the journey should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's that thing about sending a message about the maturity of the designs.
Yeah.
I really like paper prototyping, actually, where you just draw the different screens on a bit of paper and walk a user through it. Because that immediately, they know that's a very early thing. And the more polished it looks, the less they feel.
Yeah. I think because it looks so polished in Figma, I think that what I got from the developers was that they felt like it couldn't change.
Yeah.
Which is really sad, isn't it?
Well, you're basically, if you're switching off a bunch of people's creativity about it, then that's got to be a loss, isn't it? I mean, you need to have alternatives and options and think about, decide stuff. But you don't want to, I think it's a mistake to do anything that communicates to people, we don't want your input.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually you decide on something, but...
Yeah.
Before that.
So that was my thing.
That was a very good, meaty thing.
Yeah.
So what are we going to have an interlude about?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't think of an interlude. It's hard to think of an interlude on the
fly.
On the fly.
Maybe you could have an interlude that's about thinking of interludes and the process by which we do it.
Well, you kind of hope that an interlude will just come along, don't you?
One does not simply walk into an interlude.
Well, yeah, exactly. But then, if you wish for an interlude...
You watched anything good on telly recently?
No. No. I watched YouTube rather than... I watched...
Yes.
Short form video rather than not too short, not TikTok short. Let's be clear about this.
Are you going to now admit to your guilty TikTok account?
No, I don't have a TikTok account. I'm too scared. But yeah, so what have I watched on YouTube? I seem to watch a lot of videos about urban areas without cars and how to achieve that. Well, not entirely without, but with a lot less.
So in Ilkley, we are in a couple of weeks' time, or a couple of weeks ago, having our annual car-free festival.
Cool.
Where the Grove, which is kind of the main, it's not really the main shopping street, is it, in Ilkley? There's Brook Street, which goes down a hill and has Boots and Greggs on it. And then there's the Grove,
all the key services,
which goes along the top and has Betty's and posh shoe shops on it.
Yeah.
But it's very nice. The Grove has the bandstand and other features of Ilkley. So closing it to cars for the day and trying to imagine what it would be like for there to be no cars there is always an interesting
Yeah.
An interesting experiment.
Yeah. So the upshot of most of these videos is you reduce the amount of traffic, everyone complains, but then they end up really liking it because they can spend time there without fear of death.
You see, I would love to see the Grove permanently pedestrianised.
Yeah.
But it causes various traffic problems that would need to then be solved. So, for example, either it would, all the traffic that currently goes up and down, and by the way, for a narrow road with lots of parking, there's lots of cars that go up it and feel like they have to put their foot down to get to the end before somebody comes the other way.
Yeah, it kind of encourages all the wrong behaviours, doesn't it?
It's really quite frustrating trying to cross it as a pedestrian. Yeah. But what happens to all those cars is that they either go on the roads, the residential roads to the south, or they go to the trunk road, the A65 to the north, where they then get stuck in traffic jams. And so guess which one they pick if you close the Grove. There's also a small matter of there are some flats where the only way to the parking is through the Grove. So I think that there's always a chorus of disapproval from some quarters when you Tories. Sort of talk about this. And we do have now a militant motoring pressure group in Ilkley.
The Ilkley Road Safety Action Group.
Yes, they're taking action against road safety.
What do we want? Death. When do we want it? As soon as possible.
Yes.
As fast as possible.
Well, let's not forget pollution. It's like death and pollution.
Yeah.
I think they would argue that they want appropriate levels of risk management on our roads. And they're very unhappy because of 20 mile an hour limit that the town sort of voted for in the independent neighbourhood plan. And there's a whole political situation, and people are still writing indignant letters to the local paper about the 20 mile an hour zone, and particularly the speed bumps, which apparently just leaves big bits of their Range Rovers lying around the road as they fall off under the strain of going over a speed bump.
Well, there's plenty of material attached to a Range Rover. It can stand to lose a little bit, I think.
Yes, I'm a bit biased about them, actually. But, so closing the Grove is actually an emotive topic, but it is a pleasure to just walk down the middle of it.
Yeah.
And have all those nice things going on around. So if you live in Ilkley, I encourage you to go back in time 2 weeks and go to the Car Free Festival. Or maybe if you just wait around for about 50 more weeks, it will come round again. But yes, this can be the Car Free Interlude.
Car Free Interlude. So, send your complaints to Ian and Ash at whatalotofthings.com.
Yes, or technology.eors at whatalotofthings.com.
You said that wrong.
No, I didn't. I definitely did not say it wrong. There's no such thing as ye-yours, and nor should there be.
What about technologs?
No, they can continue to not exist as well, as far as I'm concerned. Especially not as an adjective relating to e-yours.
Ye-yours, you mean?
Ye-yours, sorry.
So I also ran the Yorkshireman Trail Marathon on Sunday in a town called Haworth.
Oh.
Which is in Bronte country. Many people may know of Bronte country.
It's where the various Bronte sisters lived and had their being.
So it was 26.2 miles and over 1,000 metres of climbing.
Ooh.
So it was quite painful, but weirdly fun. So I had a good time.
You're just high on endorphins that come from the pain.
Yeah. You know what I really, really like about running or walking on moors or just general wilder places?
Mm-hmm.
So in Haworth and surrounds, there's lots of sort of hydro engineering. There's lots of channels and reservoirs and funny looking bridges and devices for moving water around. And it's just this place is so cool. This is like having an adventure just by going up there and running. It's like being a kid again. It's amazing. And I think it's just the power of the wilder places like I say, it just feels like having an adventure.
Well, it's discovery and all those kind of lovely things.
Which sometimes you get you get a different kind of discovery in urban areas, but it just doesn't feel quite the same when you're in a wilder place. It feels a bit more like being a kid again.
Yeah.
So that's what I really enjoyed about the race, even though it hurt me a great deal.
Yeah. Well, you did train up hills, didn't you?
Yes.
And
not enough, apparently.
You went to Haworth and you ran up some of its hills.
Yeah.
But not enough.
Not enough. I don't think, well, it's probably never enough, but it was still a lot of fun.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Have you got a little medal?
No, there was no medal. No medal, no T-shirt.
This is very dare they.
Well, the latest wheeze within a lot of the races that you can sign up for is that you pay extra for medals and T-shirts now rather than just getting them.
Well,
but I understand that partially as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of thing about consumption, isn't there? And do you need stuff, really?
Yeah.
But it is nice to be recognised when you've done something that's hard.
Yeah.
And there's no question that running 1,000 metres of elevation gain is hard.
Yeah. But then I've got loads of running T-shirts. So,
do you wear any of them?
Yes.
Oh, well, there you go then.
Yeah. But I just end up having to throw some out. But I do that anyway because...
Do you have a T-shirt whip limit?
Yeah, I have a bit of a rotation. There's winter ones and then there's summer ones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so...
The winter ones not really being T-shirts, after all.
Yeah, more like...
Jumpers.
Jumpers, yeah, pretty much.
Fair enough.
Right, shall we move on to another thing?
Well, if we must.
Well, if you want to have two things.
We declare this interlude closed.
We declare this interlude closed. But if you want to have two things, we're going to have to do another thing here.
All right, then. I do want to have two things.
Okay, cool.
Otherwise...
What a lot of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
See, I don't understand why you resist having one thing. Because it would basically mean you could make that joke in every episode and I won't be able to do anything about it.
Yeah. But as it is, Ash, I make the joke in every single episode.
That's true, actually. Yeah.
And in the end, I edit the episode, so
the joke remains
in.
So what is your thing and what a lot of thing will always be in every episode because you'll make sure that you keep them in.
Get used to it. I'm just saying that to our singular listener.
All right, okay. Yeah. Well, for me as well, the alternative is for me to do the editing, and I'm not going to do that.
Yes. It's a good division of labour that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Place to the strand.
Yes. Yes, that's an ambiguous thing to say at best. But anyway, yes, it does.
It does. So, Ian, please tell me of your thing.
Yes, please release me from this endless conversation about metadata and tell me.
Which is exactly what Mark said not to do.
Yes. Sorry, Mark.
It's okay.
He also said he would be listening. So I feel like I have to apologise directly for going on about the mechanics of the podcast instead of the content of it. So, my thing. So, in the last episode, which actually is the last episode rather than the one before last.
Mechanics. In an episode.
In that episode, I had a thing of personal productivity.
Yeah.
And I thought I would have a bit of a mini theme to my things.
Oh, I didn't realise you were doing that.
Well, we weren't until I just thought of it just now. So my thing then is productivity. Which sounds quite similar, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But actually, I'm thinking about the kind of productivity that is being referred to by people on the radio who say, and British productivity is the lowest in the developed world.
Oh, yeah. We're always being beaten up for that, aren't we?
We are, yes.
Yeah.
And,
lazy, feckless.
We are.
Reckless.
I mean, as a country, obviously not Ash and I, we are industrious and productive.
Yeah, absolutely.
As reflected in our conversation about personal productivity.
Yeah.
But as a nation are often being berated by our...
Okay.
I'm not going to call them our betters because half of them aren't.
By our worses.
By people that our productivity is low. And of course, we all hear this all the time, and well, okay, those of us foolish enough to listen to the radio or watch television hear it quite often. And it sort of occurred to me that I wasn't all that 100% clear on what does that mean.
Sure.
And actually, what then would we have to do to have better productivity like they do in America and Germany and France and other places where they seem to have a lot better quality of life than we do. So the definition of productivity is basically GDP, so gross domestic product, the turnover in money of the nation, divided by the number of workers.
Okay.
It's economic output per worker is productivity. And apparently our economic output per worker is a bit dismal.
Oh.
So straight away, that's a really narrow definition that doesn't take account of all manner of things. Like, what about unpaid work?
Which, Ian, you're an expert on taking on.
Expert at that. Probably craft scales productivity is low as a result of the unpaid work that I do. Which actually, I suppose I'm therefore not doing my bit for the economy.
You're a downward drag on productivity.
I'm a drag. But there's lots of unpaid work. So what about unpaid carers?
Yeah.
Going to a more serious version
which is vital work.
Well, it is. And if it wasn't done, it would be very bad.
Yeah. I seem to remember reading or hearing something about if we had to pay people for all the unpaid caring work that they did, like it would bankrupt the country like many, many times over. Yeah,
I'm not surprised about that. In fact, having to pay for the caring of people that we do pay for is having that effect already.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's definitely like a crucial point.
But there's also stuff like, actually, if you want to increase productivity, so obviously taking account of unpaid work would reduce it or does reduce it. But you could say, well, let's increase productivity by flogging the workers and making them work for longer hours.
Yeah.
In theory, you would think, oh, well, their economic output would be greater and they would contribute more to GDP.
It's a good theory, but...
Just from the maths of GDP per worker, if you get more out of workers, if you get more GDP out of them, then you're dividing that by the number of workers. So immediately that would make the number higher.
Yeah.
But also making workers more valuable. Investment is a concept that has a big bearing on this. So I thought it's useful to sort of think about this and figure out what does it actually mean. But you do immediately go down to multiple rabbit holes.
Yeah, sure.
What was your impression of it before we started having this conversation?
I mean, whenever I hear someone on the, like, say, radio, television, wherever it is, saying that productivity is low, I find it quite offensive as a measure because I figure that it's like you say, it's too narrow and it doesn't take into account the truly valuable things that you might do which don't necessarily add to economic output, or not directly anyway. So if you take, I don't know, organising the Leeds testing atelier.
I was thinking of that very thing when you were talking, actually.
Yeah. So that has cost me money, let's say.
Yes.
And everyone who's ever been involved in organising it has put like their time, effort, energy into putting on a great conference for no money. But that, in this measure...
Well...
yeah. So that, by these measures, is not a contributor to productivity. And that's utter rubbish, to be brutally honest, because I think it's a massive contributor to productivity, but it's just like indirect and hard to measure. So, and then I think about all the blogs that I've written, all the articles, talks, all these things. I've been paid for some of them, yes, but not all of them. Some of them have paid me very well in exposure. Thank you very much.
That's well-known currency.
So, maybe we should have a national exposure measure. So I do find the whole debate around it a little bit patronising and offensive, to be honest, because it just doesn't take into account a lot of the things that, I don't know, that are truly valuable in life.
But the other side of it, I suppose, is that when you're thinking about, if you look at a particular company, you can kind of measure the turnover per employee.
Yeah,
and
sure.
people do. And it was always companies like Meta or, digital service companies could have these really high numbers for turnover per employee because they're raking in all these money, but based on relatively few people's work.
Yeah.
And that would make them very productive. But I'm not sure where I was going with that
It's
one.
all right.
But it feels to me that when you zoom in on particular companies or particular things, it's easy to look at something. So say the Leeds Testing Atelier, what a great example. You zoom into that and just say, right, I'm just going to look at the productivity of that as an enterprise, for example, or organisation or whatever. That's obviously rubbish. The productivity is negative because actually you're putting in money and getting nothing out. You've got minus so much money per person.
Yeah.
But if you zoom out and look at the big measure of productivity, if you're making X number of workers more effective, let's say you make them 0.5% more effective, then I guess the cumulative impact on productivity could potentially be quite good.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's hard to measure, isn't it?
It is hard to measure.
Yeah.
But I think these national things, at the national level of national productivity, it is hard to measure. But I feel like investment in making people more effective and thus enabling them to have a higher economic output actually makes a lot of sense. And spending money on infrastructure projects and stuff like that, the sort of thing that governments would like to do, but apparently they are constantly wrestling with the presence of alleged astronomical objects in the budgets in the form of black holes.
Another gravitational anomaly.
Yes, in the budget.
Yeah.
That really sucks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I read there's a productivity.ac.uk site which had an article saying what explains the UK's productivity problem. So I went and had a look at that and thought, well, how does this relate to like my experience of productivity? So they talked about investment in either better machinery, better kit, and then investing in people as well. And I thought, well, and then about how productivity is, it will shock you that in Britain, productivity is very unequal between sectors and between companies. Some companies are very productive, but that doesn't translate to other companies as well. So there's no sharing going on. So they kind of came up with three things. So the first one was like better investment in kit and training. And I thought, how does that apply to like my experience? So like some companies have good training budgets in tech, which are easy to access and they encourage you to go and use them.
Yep.
Some companies obviously have very, very difficult to access training budgets.
Yep.
Or and you need to be politically savvy within that organization in order to access it, know that it exists, and then know how to unlock it, which I've been in both paths before.
Yeah.
So I found that really, really interesting to say, well, how do different companies, how do they approach releasing sort of funds for training? And then also you've got like, you remember like when you might have gone to work for a company and they gave you like an old laptop.
Yes.
And I remember I got one from the test people and it had a clicky fan. And then I went onto a client site and the fan was just like, and then someone from the client said, we're glad to have you, but if that continues, we're going to be a lot less glad to have you around. So slightly off the wall example, but it is like I was given old kit.
But it's quite easy to make a business case to say I wasted an hour and a half because I couldn't be on a client site.
Yeah.
Or I wasted whatever, and then suddenly they're giving you the right kit to begin with.
Exactly. But things like that I've found them hard to do in a lot of companies. It's just like, just give me the right kit for the job. Whereas I think certainly technology companies are better at that now.
Yeah.
But I think that plays into like the other point where it's like the inequality in productivity. So from this Productivity Institute link, the UK is generally regarded as innovative. It's fourth in the Global Innovation Index, but it's only a small number of sectors and companies that are responsible for that productivity. So, which probably a lot of the more higher tech companies probably are part of that productive area, because you get good kit, you get access to training, and you can become more productive when these companies actually invest in you. But that is not like the case throughout the country. So I found that really interesting as well. So those practices aren't shared broadly throughout companies.
Yeah. To increase productivity, work harder, not smarter.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I guess that comes to like one of the other things as well with you are generally told to work harder, aren't you?
Yeah.
So at the last startup I was at, I was told that basically the difference between the startup living and dying was you need to work harder. And I was like, that's utter rubbish.
Were you stealing a living, Ash?
Yeah, basically.
Was that what you were doing?
And I was like, that is utter rubbish. And I always worry when people say that to me, because that means that you're fresh out of ideas,
Yeah.
I can't think of anything and I'm fresh out of ideas. So, and then the last point was the things that generate productivity are all centralised in the UK. So education, innovation, transport, planning, regional development, ironically enough, are all held in Whitehall.
Yes.
So the things that could actually stimulate productivity, they're all centrally held, and they're not devolved out to the regions that need them. So if you have like regional inequality in productivity, then that's all the keys to unlock all that are all held centrally. And let's be honest, they're not that interested in unlocking it.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting link, and obviously we'll include it in the show notes, but it kind of broke down like why the UK is in some of the barriers to productivity that we have.
So that's the Productivity Institute.
Yeah.
I did, when I saw your link, I was quite kind of, productivity.ac.uk. This is going to be very, very on the nose.
I found that like a good breakdown of like everything of like national productivity in the state, in the UK anyway.
Well, I think that's really useful. And for me, it's trying to know just what it means and be able to evaluate the things that governments do and politicians.
Yeah. But I do think there's definitely like a reaction to whenever the lower productivity story comes, it's like, well, you need to work harder. Everybody needs to work harder and longer.
Yes.
But unfortunately, that's rarely the answer. But it is the answer which probably politically you're more tempted to broadcast, because it appeals to a wide range of people. Because everybody thinks that they work really hard, don't they?
Yes.
Or they think that the generation after them, exactly.
Lazy.
But the reality is that there was, within any generation, there's always been hardworking people who work less, people who are not interested in work, people who are extremely career driven. It's just people.
Yeah.
Not generations. So, the productivity wasn't any better with the last generation, as it's not any better with this generation. So maybe there's something else going on.
It's a mystery.
Yeah. And then things that annoy me about work culture as well. So presenteeism.
Oh, yes.
Which we can find very nicely in the debate around whether or not you go into the office now, post-pandemic, which is, I think anyone who works in tech will probably have an opinion on this, but here we go. So the productivity in a tech role from working from home is off the scale compared to what you get if you're in an office every day. I'm not saying there's no room to go into an office to collaborate with people, but for focus work, then it's difficult to measure the two. So the project that I was working on during the pandemic was a Brexit project, which would have never been delivered on time had we been in the office, because the office there was room for 60 people in the office. There was 60 desks, but there was 120 people trying to work in there. So on any given day. So if you didn't get there at 6 a.m., then you never got a desk. So, and if someone tries to tell me that that's a more productive environment.
No. I mean, if you get there at 6 a.m., then you're working very long hours. So that'll be very productive.
Yeah, that's true, actually. I didn't think of that.
In fact, you could argue the desk limitations could be a spur for productivity, forcing people to compete for desk space. No, I mean, the presenteeism thing is quite true. And I think the assumption that people aren't working when you can't see them is what leads to employee monitoring software. And we all know about that. Yeah. Controlio! I thought, no, I was going to say that. And I thought, no, I can't deny Ash the pleasure of
I really enjoy it.
Casting his one spell.
It's a good spell. For spreading misery.
Yes. For making sure we're measuring the misery. Because otherwise we won't know how productive people are.
So the other bit that I found quite interesting as well was the existence of what's called the Protestant work ethic.
Oh, yes, we know about that.
Yes. So it was an idea coined by Max Weber in 1905, which came from being productive as a means of salvation. So, and it's kind of ingrained into us, like the need to work and work harder and longer. So there was a good Guardian article about it, which talks about, there's a quote, so I like this quote. So when it comes to accumulating profit, what could be more perfect than hard work, self-denial, plus the threat of eternal damnation for the lazy?
Well.
Then, when Europe got too comfortable, the Puritans left for America to work even harder and self-deny more vigorously, culminating triumphantly in the corporate culture that brought you the Furby, aerosol cheese, and Crocs.
Aerosol cheese.
So
I'm almost tempted to press buttons on my console just then.
So that strange sort of thread that has persisted throughout the centuries around like what work being some kind of purifying force in your life, and if you're not being productive, then your soul will go to hell for eternal damnation.
It's almost as if that was in someone's interest for that to be commonly believed.
Yes, indeed.
Also, it makes me think of Jacob Rees-Mogg, which is who's a politician.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure why, because he's a Catholic.
Yeah.
But I think he buys into the Protestant work ethic. Possibly the only aspect of Protestantism that he does buy into.
Yeah. So I see that you asked Claude about UK's low productivity.
Yes, it talks about the productivity puzzle, which is the term that's apparently been coined for trying to figure out the mystery of the UK poor productivity. Then a couple of interesting bits came out of that. One of the big ones was about having a service-oriented economy, which we do.
Yeah.
And how much more concrete productivity is in a manufacturing context and how it becomes a bit vague.
Yeah.
There's often multiple outcomes of services, some of which are easier than others to measure. For example, if a doctor sees a lot of patients, were they productive? Versus if a doctor makes the aggregate health of their patients, it has a greater increase in the patient's health. Is that better productivity? And obviously only one of those is easy to measure, so I guess that's the one that gets measured.
Yeah. So we don't think the productivity puzzle is anything to do with the fact that most companies, the shareholder dividend in the next 3 months is the general horizon.
Yeah.
But then again, that's true in other countries as well, isn't it?
Yes.
So maybe it's always more complicated than that, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, when I was asking Claude about it, I was also wondering about how AI will improve productivity by firing workers and reducing the number of workers while sustaining the economic output. So I imagine that AI is going to make our productivity soar at the same time as...
Because there'll be less workers.
At the same time as everyone's life is going down the drain.
Yeah.
Which I suppose just goes to show what a lousy measure it is.
Yeah. I think some countries have tried to measure in different ways, haven't they?
I think so, yes.
Mm.
It's interesting how countries with better qualities of life can have greater productivity as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's another disrespecter of that as a measure.
Yeah.
So obviously it's better to do more with less, but maybe not at the expense of people.
Yeah. So maybe you can measure in a different way, I guess.
Well, there are some interesting ideas in Wikipedia about that. They had a thing called GPI.
GPI.
Just going to find it. GPI. So one of these things is a thing called GPI, which is Genuine Progress Indicator.
I like that.
Which is supposed to replace or supplement GDP. So the GPI is designed to take fuller account of the well-being of a nation in a shocking development, only a part of which pertains to the size of the nation's economy. So it incorporates environmental and social factors. I'm a bit worried about what the GPI of the UK will be.
Based on the UK's working culture, how much genuine progress do we make?
No, it's okay. It's also the Global Peace Index.
Oh, right, okay.
I'm not able to find out what the UK's GPI is in an Insta Google. Which actually is a misnomer, because I actually use the search engine Kagi, Kagi, which I pay a bit for, but as a result, never see an ad. Or one of Google's celebrated Gemini summaries of the search results, which you hear bad things about from time to time. So I guess that's a bit of a big, vague, rambly thing, but I thought it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess now I will have slightly greater knowledge about what they mean when they start complaining about how our productivity is low. And I can say, yes, but what about our genuine progress index? And then they can be bamboozled. They normally can't hear me because I'm normally shouting at the television or something. But, maybe. I guess that's my thing.
Nice thing. Like you say, lots of very, very deep issues there.
Yes, but not meaty. We're no longer going to say that about our things.
No. It's truly a monumental thing. It truly is. I say that genuinely.
Yes.
That's a genuine progress indicator.
Yes. So what's what a lot of things genuine progress indicator?
How monumental the thing is.
Yes. And how many people listen to us. But we're only talking to one of you. But the good thing is it's you and not any of the others.
No comment.
Ash is getting the look on his face that appears when we start having these temporal distortion events.
Within my brain.
Yes. So, that was two things.
Two things.
And now we can talk about whatever we talk about when we're finishing. It's not an interlude.
It's not an interlude. It's an outro.
An outro. An interlude and an outro. That does sound like they might be the opposites of each other. Because inter begins with in.
So how'd you get in touch, Ian?
Well, I just send you a message on Signal.
How might someone who has listened get in touch with us?
Oh, I see. Sorry, I didn't realise that's what you were asking.
Yeah.
They could email us via our email address, which is technologyeors@whatalotofthings.com.
Yeah.
And they could join our flourishing LinkedIn group.
Yep.
If you're not in our LinkedIn group, then you're missing out on some hot takes from Ash about what was in the episode. We always have the show notes, and then we have the Ash summary of the show notes, which is always fascinating to me. So if you're missing out on that, really, there's no need to. No. You can join the What a Lot of Things LinkedIn group, and we'd love to have you.
We would.
And sometimes we even have little conversations in it. I wouldn't say we've solved any major world issues, but we do sometimes have little chats with people, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We do. We will respond.
We will. Sometimes accidentally, as what lot of things or as ourselves.
Well, yeah.
It's a bit of a baffling user experience, to be honest. Are there any other ways that people could get in touch with us? I can't think of any.
No.
They could lie in wait and ambush us in the street as we were walking past. I've never been asked for an autograph yet, but
No.
there's a first time for everything.
When I was on my way to a conference in Poland and someone asked me on the train if I was Ash Winter. And I was like...
Did you say who's asking?
No, I said, yes, I am.
Are you the Ash Winter?
And they said they subscribe to my blog and follow me on Twitter, as it was then.
I'm waiting for a very important further thing that they do. They listen to your podcast.
This was pre-podcast.
Oh, was it? Oh. Wow, that must have been like a decade.
Yeah.
We're coming up to the 5th anniversary of our first episode.
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably already gone past due to the time distortion factor. Has it? No, it won't have done. As this comes out, it's imminently going to be our 5th anniversary of our first episode.
Yeah.
And while we cannot say that we are indeed up to the 125th episode that you might expect from that, from that duration, we are climbing.
We're trucking
rapidly.
along nicely.
We are. We're showing consistency.
Showing consistency, which is more important than deadlines
The high quality.
and high quality.
It's more important than anything
It is.
if you're making a podcast.
Okay.
Super. Well, thank you for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
No!
I want to say thanks, everyone. And goodbye.
No. You're not allowed to thank everyone. He's trying to press the button on my console. I'm the only tin pot despot.
I'm being oppressed.
Help. or the other version of it, which occasionally happens, is help, I'm being impressed.
I'm being impressed. Come and see the violence that's inherent in the system.
Inherent.
Ian's system.
My system, yes. The ruthless oppression of the podcast hardware.
Press the button.